Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of Got a Story for You. I'm Phil Giunta, and this episode and story reading are both dedicated to one of my favorite writers, Harlan Ellison. Harlan would have been 86 years old today, May 27th, but he shuffled off this mortal coil on June 28th, 2018, leaving behind a nearly 60-year legacy as one of the most awarded writers of all time. What do I mean when I say that? Well, I mean eight and a half Hugos, six Bram Stokers, four Nebulas, two World Fantasy Awards, two Edgar Awards, the British Fantasy Award, and in 2006, the SFWA named him as their Grand Master, an award presented by Neil Gaiman. That's just off the top of my head and probably about a quarter of Harlan's total awards. His enviable career spans over 1,700 short stories, novels, novellas, teleplays, screenplays, articles, essays, and film critiques. And he was not only an influential writer, but also an editor, especially with the Dangerous Visions and Again Dangerous Visions anthologies, which made careers and reputations. I had the honor of meeting Harlan at Icon Science Fiction Convention in 1999 in Stony Brook, New York, and again had another honor after his passing in February of 2019 when I co hosted, along with Peter David, a screening of Dreams with Sharp Teeth at the Farpoint Science Fiction Convention in Hunt Valley, Maryland. Dreams with Sharp Teeth is a 90-minute documentary about the life and career of Harlan Ellison. It was produced and directed by Eric Nelson. It's a wonderfully entertaining and inspiring documentary with some great extras. There's a segment of Harlan reading some of his stories. There is the premiere of the film at the Writers Guild Theater in California, and a pizza lunch with Harlan and Neil Gaiman in Harlan's Kitchen. So a lot of fun, wonderful documentary. I recommend it for all Harlan Ellison fans. Moving along to today's story reading. This is a tale that I wrote in January of 2018. It's called Burn After Writing, and it picks up on two of Harlan's sort of personality traits and wishes. Personality trait is, as many fans know, Harlan was he was a vindictive guy. If you wronged him, he would seek revenge. And he would do it in some of the most entertaining and unique ways as only Harlan could do. But also, I read in an interview, or possibly saw it on a video somewhere, that he had instructed his wife Susan, and I guess any of his assistants, to destroy any unfinished manuscripts upon his death. And I thought that was two things that were very interesting, and they sort of planted a seed for a story in my mind. And so the story came out as Burn After Writing, and it will be published later this year by Oddity Prodigy Productions. They're a small press based in Delaware, and they're coming out with an anthology that is an homage to the EC Comics titles such as Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, Haunt of Fear. The anthology is called Scary Stuff. And if you're a fan of those comic books I just mentioned, you'll recognize the layout and the design of this cover. I love the cover art. I think it's beautiful. I think it's fantastic. I'm honored to be part of this project, and I look forward to seeing the book out in print and ebook later this year. And as we get closer to that time, I'll make an announcement, and there'll be links to Oddity Prodigy and an homage that I wrote for Harlan after his death in 2018 on my blog. I'll include that link below as well in the show notes. So, without further ado, I'd like to read for you my story, Burn After Writing, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Crackling flames leapt from the immense stone fireplace like the snapping claws of some ravenous monster. Or is that just my imagination? Shane Conrad took a step back as he stared at the blazing hearth in Adrian Halka's lakeside cabin. Behind him, multicolored file folders had been stacked atop a table by Halka's widow, food for the beast. It had been the great writer's final wish that they be burned, no exceptions. While Shane understood Halka's reasons, he did not agree with them at all. To an editor and fellow fantasist, the very notion of destroying the unfinished works of one of the most awarded writers in history was abhorrent. I found two more. Robin shuffled into the room and tossed a pair of blue file folders onto the table. Each one was easily an inch thick, with pages held together by large binder clips. Shane picked up the top folder and began flipping through it. Is there a code behind these colors? If I recall correctly, a blue folder indicates a story in progress, yellow means that Adrian was still developing the idea and maybe had an outline, and the red folders have a page or two of notes he jotted down when inspiration struck. That's why the red ones are the thinnest. Shane sighed as he fanned the pages. I have to be honest with you, Robin, I'm struggling with the idea of burning all this. She joined him in front of the fire. I know. I noticed your expression when the lawyer read that part of Adrian's will. I thought you were going to swallow your head. I can name a dozen capable writers, myself included, who would be honored to finish some of these, and we could do it in Adrian's style without sacrificing the integrity of his work. Robin chuckled as she sat against the table. It was probably the first time she had cracked a smile since her husband's death. You remember Adrian's reaction years ago when that publisher turned one of his manuscripts over to a hack because Adrian refused to make the revisions they wanted? He sent them a box of dead rats by third-class mail in the middle of summer. Cost him thousands to fumigate. Well, there'll never be another like Adrian. To the relief of many in your business, I'm sure. Robin placed a gentle hand on Shane's arm. It wasn't that Adrian didn't trust you, but he was adamant that if his name was on it, it had to be entirely his work and no one else's. I know. Shane held up the folder. Did you ever read any of these unfinished stories? Robin shook her head. I could barely keep up with the published ones, all 2,000 over 54 years. Speaking of which, Adrian loved your stories. That's why he kept encouraging you to quit editing and get back to writing. What was it he used to say? There's a special place in hell for editors. Present company excluded, of course. Well, as a matter of fact, I have 3 short stories coming out later this year and 2 novels in progress. Robin gave his arm a gentle squeeze. Adrian would be proud. A slow melody began playing from elsewhere in the house. She pushed away from the table. I left my phone in the kitchen. As much as it pains you, my dear, start feeding the fire. I'll be right back. The moment she vanished from view, Shane gathered both of the blue folders and slipped them into his backpack beneath the table. By the time Robin returned, he had burned through half of the remaining stack of folders. They finished the rest in silence. Standing at the lectern in Ebba Mackey's bookshop, Shane finished reading the opening chapter of his new fantasy novel before a small but appreciative audience. Ignoring the throbbing in his head, he smiled during their applause and began taking questions. A middle-aged woman in the second row raised her hand. What inspired you to return to writing after so many years as an editor? Well, last January, the world lost a brilliant writer in Adrian Halka. Some of you knew Adrian personally. He gave readings and signed books in this very store. I edited much of Adrian's later work for Cinderbox Press, and we became fast friends. Over time, I looked to him as a mentor. Years of exposure to his writing elevated the quality of mine, until Adrian all but ordered me to quit meddling with other people's work and get back to creating my own. Shane held up the hardback copy of his book. But it wasn't until his death that I finally took his advice. He shot a sidelong glance at the back cover and met the accusing gaze of Adrian Halka. You took more than my advice, you son of a... The book slipped from Adrian's grasp and slammed onto the lectern. No one in the audience seemed to hear the disembodied voice, but they stared at him expectantly. Shane cleared his throat again as he straightened the book. Sorry about that, folks. He pressed a hand to his chest. Even after all this time, I still become emotional when I think about Adrian. Any more questions? 2 hours later, after scribbling his name in more than a dozen copies of his novel, Shane thanked the last customer before slumping back in his chair. He slipped off his glasses and massaged the bridge of his nose, just as an older woman took the empty seat beside him. You know, as I listened to your reading, I could definitely hear Adrian's influence. I look forward to reading the rest of it. She leaned forward, brow furrowed. You feeling all right? Shane cast a weary glance on shop owner Ebba Mackey. I must be coming down with something. I woke up with a scratchy throat and a relentless headache. Ebba pressed 2 gnarled fingers against his forehead. You do seem a bit feverish, kiddo. She slid her chair a few inches away. No offense, I can't afford to get sick. I'm a delicate old termagant. At least, that's what Adrian used to call me. Lady, you're about as delicate as Krakatoa. Are you implying that I have a volcanic temper? Remind me why you and Adrian got divorced? Ebba turned her gaze away and began straightening a stack of Shane's books. She flipped one over, and Shane was relieved to see his own smiling visage on the back cover. Adrian was the unstoppable force to my immovable object. Writing was his mistress, and I couldn't compete. Of course, I didn't offer much support either. Ours was a brief and volatile marriage, but we became friends again after some time apart. I was happy for him when he found Robin. She's a strong woman. What about you, handsome young stud? Any luck on the romantic front? Shane stifled a chill and began to suspect Ebba was right about the fever. He forced a wan smile. I'm still looking for Miss Wright, but not today. Today I'm going home, making chicken soup, and going to bed. Despite the lively throng of well-wishers in his apartment, Shane couldn't stop shivering. As he walked through his living room, smiling faces blurred past on either side. Overlapping voices congratulated him on his recent success. He recognized most of them. His parents and sister, friends old and new, even ex-girlfriends had turned up to celebrate. Robin was there, chatting with Ebba beside the familiar stone fireplace from Adrian's cabin. How did this get here? Shane shouldered his way toward them and stood before the hearth, trembling uncontrollably. He crouched down and closed his eyes, relishing the warmth on his face and hands. How you feeling, Shane? He turned to find a short, stout man in black cargo pants standing over him. His salt and pepper beard covered the top buttons of a disheveled blue and white plaid shirt. The room fell silent. Everyone else had vanished. Adrian, what are you doing? Looks like you're running a fever, boy. Adrian's hands shot forward, clutching Shane's throat and pressing him backward toward the flames. Better feed the fire. Wait! Shane awoke, thrashing and kicking in a tangle of sheets and blankets. When he finally extricated himself, he sat on the edge of the bed and glanced at the alarm clock. It was just after 3 in the morning. The TV was still on, casting the bedroom in a feeble blue glow. He snatched the digital thermometer from the nightstand and slipped it under his tongue before wrapping himself in a blanket. Glancing at the TV, Shane instantly recognized an old talk show from the 1980s, though he couldn't recall the name of it. So what, if anything, do you dislike about writing? The host asked. I don't dislike anything about writing, his guest shrugged, before turning his chair to face the camera. But I do hate people who steal my work. Shane tore the thermometer from his mouth. Adrian, ain't no fever-induced dream this time, Conrad. You know, I don't even care that you lied to your publisher or to your readers, but you lied to my wife. Hell, you even lied to my ex-wife. You were like a son to me, boy. Shane shot to his feet and started toward the TV, shivering either from fever or fear or both. Adrian, please, I'm sorry. Screw your apology. You betrayed me. Why? Shane's vision blurred and his knees buckled. He fell back against the bed. The digital thermometer in his hand began beeping, but he was too weak to lift his arm. I hadn't published a novel in 8 years. I needed a fast comeback. Mine were taking too long. So, instead of respecting my final wishes, you stole my unpublished work. Of all people. You burned me up, Conrad, and now I'm returning the favor. Shane slid to the floor, writhing under the furious scowl of Adrian Halka. What began as a tingling throughout his body erupted with the torture of 1,000 bee stings, and the only sound louder than the electric squeal of the thermometer was his own agonized shriek. The police found Shane Conrad lying on the floor of his bedroom, loosely covered in the scorched tatters of a blanket. When the coroner arrived, the young sergeant was all too happy to give him a few minutes to perform his initial examination, any excuse to tear his gaze away from the body. No sign of forced entry or struggle. We found no cigarettes or alcohol on him, and nothing else in the room appears to have been affected, except for this. He held up the evidence bag containing the melted remains of a digital thermometer. The coroner motioned for the body to be bagged. Well, ruling all that out, it could have been a natural cause, but I won't know for sure until I perform an autopsy. You all right, Sergeant? It's his face. The neighbor who called said it sounded like the guy was screaming in terror. I've never seen anything like that. I have, just not to this degree. The coroner stared at the body bag as the zipper closed over the charred, blackened corpse of Shane Conrad.